We're live. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. I'm very happy to be back in Melbourne after my first interstate trip this week since COVID.
No, you're falling behind, Karen. Your frequent flying points aren't looking great.
No, they're not. No, but I drive a lot. Yeah, my odometer's not looking great though. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I think we've both got it's been a good news week for both of us, hasn't it? With one of my daughters getting engaged.
My brother's engaged.
Yeah.
I think the same day as well.
Which is pretty
There's
impressive.
love's in the air, people.
It's got to be, hasn't it? There's certainly love's in the air on my tummy, I can tell you that. Post lockdown, I think I've made up for the food I didn't eat at restaurants beforehand.
Right.
So, yeah, from 1 April, the girls and I are on a strict diet. Mine's a bit stricter than theirs because they're much younger, thinner, leaner and fitter than me, so they don't have to go quite so hard.
Yep.
But yeah, 3 months.
3 months.
No alcohol, 3 months.
Yeah, that's intense. I think that's great, Andrew.
No, and I'll be able to accumulate all the wine I drank during lockdown back in the cellar, so it'll be full again by the end of it. Not sure Gail thinks that's very good, but it's very impressive. And for Everett, I actually found all the scotch, which is Everett's
Works with me.
Karen's brother, who likes scotch. I found all the scotch that I've been storing and hiding when we had to move out of the house because I was staying in a hotel for 10 days while our floor gets fixed.
Yeah.
And I think I've got quite a bit to share with it. But there's stuff I've got hidden away there I didn't even know I had hidden away.
Yeah, well, between your scotch and steaks, I think you two have a lot in common there. But anyway, but otherwise, no, life is good, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's been an interesting week. It's been pretty interesting watching what's happening in two sort of places, which we'll talk a bit about today. What's happening in federal government in responses to COVID, in response to the clear focus it's having on respect for women.
Yes.
And how they're responding to that. And I think that, whichever party you support, you'd be pretty disappointed in where we are at the moment. There's really a lack of energy in doing anything that we would do in a workplace every day, that we think is important, which is, looking through the lens of diversity and embracing and saying what we want is good outcomes for everybody, which are equal. And we want to make sure daily we respect people. So I'm underwhelmed by the news that I'm reading as people continue to fire pot shots.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm even more underwhelmed by the politics that sit around the rollout of the COVID vaccine, which again is more spin than accuracy. And there just has to be some collaboration between federal government and state to make sure that this actually happens as quickly as possible. Unlike some people who say there's no rush, well, for those of us who work internationally, there's a huge rush. For those of us who wish to travel more broadly, and that's our whole tourist economy, which represents our fourth largest investment in Australia coming in. So there is actually a real urgency in getting this done. And for the health of Australian people, there's an urgency.
Do we have a supply issue though?
We do have some supply issue, but
I've got friends who work in the medical area, and they're like, we have to organise it ourselves, and we just not be able to get access.
I know, but that's the rollout. Because the rollout was flawed in the manner which it was doing. So there are all the sorts of problems as people try and use a political lens to deliver a health outcome, rather than saying the health outcome matters. And it's not just one government; it's all governments who are embroiled in that.
Yeah.
Look, it's time for us to kick off. So welcome for the people who just joined us. The first thing we want to talk about today is the new changes that have been brought in by the federal government around sexual harassment. You've heard quite a bit of noise. It comes from the Respect at Work report, which was actually published around about a year ago, and the recommendations that you'll be surprised to learn have hardly been implemented at all. But one of the suggestions to make was to broaden the Sexual Discrimination Act, so it included federal parliamentarians and judges, and so it should, to lengthen the period of time in which you can bring a complaint under the Sex Discrimination Act from 6 months to 2 years. Again, a good thing, but it's always been a flexible limitation period you can get around. And to change the Fair Work Act to make sexual harassment serious misconduct. Now, that sounds really good, doesn't it? And it's meant to lighten the load, particularly on women who then don't have to go through a complaints procedure to actually have the matter addressed. And to be kind about that, that's just a complete crock. The fact is, serious misconduct defines any form of sexual harassment then as something which warrants summary termination That's a dumb thing to do. It's proper to focus on the risk to women, and the actual regulation 107 provides this protection in a more sophisticated manner than just broadly making serious misconduct out of sexual harassment. But it doesn't fine the company. It doesn't make the company liable and therefore the company enforced to do something about it. What it does, it says, is you can terminate a person for doing it. And to do that, you've got to conduct an investigation based upon a complaint. And that's got to be based on a Brigginshaw test on the balance of probabilities. Did it occur? And seeing as most sexual harassment is discrete, it's done person on person, it's always going to be an incredibly complex and difficult thing. So I'm afraid that although this is a good move forward and it moves towards respecting women and acknowledges women should be respected, okay? And I think that's something which we should all stand up and say, that's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually a spin panacea to try and calm down a problem the federal government has at the moment. And it really does nothing to address the issue of sexual harassment in the way that it should be addressed. And Karen, we've spoken about what are the appropriate methods of dealing with this.
Yeah, look, but in terms of dealing with competency is really what it's about in terms of the understanding of what constitutes sexual harassment, what constitutes appropriate behaviours. It's not, you know, a one time of year where we talk about it or when an incident occurs. It's this, you either know it or you don't, and you either manage it every day and you demonstrate it, you know, your leadership are held accountable, they lead the way, or they don't. I think that's practically, like, that's what we need to be doing and focusing on.
Yeah,
and the legislation is helpful. I mean, that is.
It's helpful.
But you can't rely on that. It's okay, we're just going to change the way we do things now because the law says we should. Well, that's the flawed thinking.
Yeah, and the tokenistic way it's commonly done, which is you send the policy out before the Christmas party, which what it says to women is men are inherently dangerous, but if we warn them not to be dangerous when they drink.
But in doing that,
you're going to be safe.
Yeah, but in sending that out right before Christmas, for those, you know, look, I know most of the people in our group here don't probably moved away from that type of practice. But in doing that, you're recognizing that something bad's about to happen. So you knew all year long.
But that capability existed. That's why I say it's a tokenistic. Yeah. What it's saying is, look, if I feed that guy alcohol, he's going to behave badly. So I'm watching you. Whereas the answer is sexual harassment and sexual inequality is every part of daily life.
It's daily business.
Yeah. So anyway, look, that's an interesting discussion. We thought we'd bring you some facts on it because I think the media is lacking the facts at the moment. What I thought we might then jump into is talking a little bit about a couple of cases. And the first case that I want to talk about is HSU v Huntington, which is a dispute that was brought by Health Union. And it was brought in relation to a particular aged care facility, which said, Karen, if you work in 3 or 4 different facilities during COVID, if you're working somewhere else, you're stood down from here. It's what was called a one employer policy. And the purpose of that was to have infection control.
Mm-hmm.
The communication of that was done by 2 text messages. You'll be not surprised to learn there is no evidence of safety assessment that's been done in the process at all. And you and I have been dealing with this for a number of different health facilities over the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. And
it's not surprising at all that when the Deputy President involved in the arbitration was listening to it, he said, well, it breaches their contract of employment. It's contrary to Section 524, the stand-down provisions under the Fair Work Act. It actually breaches the award. It fails in consultation. It fails in absolutely everything that you can fail in, and you will be paying correctly going forward. They're not to be stood down, and I make a recommendation that they should be paid in the past. And by the way, a Fair Work recommendation is not enforceable, but the failure to comply with it can lead to action of enforcement and penalties. So although this aged care did everything for the right reason, it didn't even think through the most basic issue. What is the issue with COVID? It's not that it's a pandemic. It's actually that it's a hazard. So you go to the safety law first. And Karen, we've built this for a number of organisations. Maybe you can talk more about it.
Yeah, so it's understanding the context of the hazard and the context of your organisation and the operation. So where is it that the risk, the critical risk, like, because the hazard, even though you don't have it, and even though we're not at the peak of COVID anymore, the hazard's still there, right? So, and is it a critical? Yes, because it's the probability or the likelihood of it really causing serious illness or injury or potentially death is also there. So you do have to have some controls, have controls in place, but also a mechanism of being able to manage that. And unfortunately for this organisation, had they done that correctly from the start, they wouldn't be where they are now or had to go through that.
And the other part is, the safety legislation, as well as the award, tells you when you're about to institute a change, you have to have meaningful consultation.
That is absolutely critical.
Which is, you've got to say, what is the case? Now, they couldn't say what the case is because they had no risk assessment. They can't just, they bundled together a couple of government orders and said, see, we've got to do this. And actually, the orders didn't say that. They had to have this health and safety evidence, and they had to consult with people to get that accurately, and they had to look for opportunities with those people to manage it. None of which they did. They said, the law is this, bang, we'll send you a text. That's it, you stood down.
Yeah, the last client I helped do this, they were excellent in that, they were quite a large group. They had many different parts of the business, and in terms of the engagement with employees and feedback, consultation was done properly, allowed them to be able to put things in place where people could work across multiple places safely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really important.
Anyway, look, I guess the lessons from this are, please, COVID is a safety issue. It's not a catchphrase. Use safety techniques. They're really good. They're designed for managing all sorts of risks, including pandemics. And secondly, please consult. You're obliged to do it under safety legislation. You're obliged to do it under the underlying award or enterprise agreements. And morally, that's always where you should be. You should talk to people when you're about to affect their lives.
Yeah.
And maybe they've got good ideas you should listen to as well. So, interesting case.
Yes.
Not earth-shattering, not new law, but a really good example of where we need to be. Next case is LWB and Smith. This is again a sort of odd case. This is a case of a guy who was employed in the health industry. He was alleged to have bullied someone. There was an investigation. The investigation found on the balance of probabilities did. And so rather than sack him, they moved him to another unit of this organisation, which means they moved him to a different location. And in his contract of employment, it said you work at this specific unit. So you all know that, won't you? In your contracts of employment, you have that phrase which says location of work.
Yep.
And if you've got the right clause, unlike this one, then you know that you can move people with a fair degree of safety on reasonable business purposes. This one didn't say that. It said this was a specific location. The award had what was called a mobility clause, which allowed under certain circumstances to consult with people to move them voluntarily. So not to consult, to move people voluntarily, or to consult with them and then direct under certain circumstances. And the award was part of the contract of employment, okay? They moved this guy, which was the appropriate, was the appropriate action to take. Not surprisingly, he brought an action saying his contract was repudiated as a result of, they repudiated because he's meant to be working this place this term. It eventually got through 2 layers of courts before a court said, look, it looks like an essential term, but actually because the award is involved and there's a mobility clause, and listen to that very carefully, no award probably would have been an essential term. Bad news for you. So it's not an essential term. An essential term is, another word for it is a fundamental term. If you breach a fundamental term, you are taken to have repudiated your contract, and a person can accept that repudiation, which would be, in this case, an unfair termination, okay? As the court looked, they said, no, the award allows this mobility and therefore it's not an essential term, and the awards always have primacy. They are bigger than the contract. Now remember, we can get a contract that improves the conditions under an award, but what you can't do is reduce the capacity of the award, okay? And that's why the award was primacy. And so in those circumstances, it was reasonable to redirect him to another place.
Okay. So taking a few steps back there, had we drafted the agreement properly and be really thoughtful and diligent around what clauses we're putting in, what the impact or effect of those clauses would be, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, and the clause is really easy. You're employed to work at this location and such other reasonable locations as required from time to time by the organisation. That's the clause.
Yeah.
Which for those of us who use our contracts, you'll find that they're there. Okay, so I want to remind you about template contracts. We did the Qantas and Jetstar case only 3 weeks ago, where there was a whole argument about restraints because somebody had pressed a word processor and used a series of templates and stuck them together. Again, this is a template contract issue where the people who turn out the contracts just assume that everything is right every time, rather than go, I'm engaging Karen is this right? Because sometimes the template is wrong, and unless you address it every single time and look at it and go, how does that work for Karen? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you've got a flaw in it. But please always make sure that you do the right thing when you engage somebody, that the contract works for them. All right, we're on to mental health, Karen.
Mental health. So, if Sophie...
Can I bookend this while Sophie puts up your slide?
Yeah.
What we thought we'd do is we'd do a bit of a dig deep in data, okay? Karen's got some specific data, but what I want to tell you is generally what the evidence is. The evidence is that, and this was before COVID, that people who work for a prolonged period of time at home are more inclined to develop mental health illnesses, and when they work for a period of time which is for a specific purpose, they have high levels of productivity, but over a period of time, people who work only at home over a prolonged period of time, the productivity drops. So that's unequivocal evidence. The other evidence which we now know from COVID is this. We know from COVID that the most productive place of work is not necessarily being at work, okay? During the crisis, when you look at our production figures in our business, because people were so committed to achieving, they were much more productive working from home. Now, remember, there's the two-pole things. What we're now seeing in COVID is a spike in mental health claims coming through workers' compensation. We're seeing a spike in the growth of people seeking psychiatric help from various institutions. So we thought that might plateau at the peak of COVID, but what we're now seeing is this taking off, and we know the underlying factors behind that is people are unsure about the engagement model of coming back to work. There's a lack of clarity about what coming back to work is. There's a lack of purpose. Why would I come back to work? And there's this still huge underlying fear of COVID that sits out there quite rightly in the community. And what is the world going to look like in the future? Because of the volatility that disrupted everybody's world, and they thought they could pay their mortgage 6 months ago, and tomorrow they're not sure they'll be able to pay it next month. So I just want to give you those two poles of, we know that work is not the most productive place, and we know that working from home can be productive, but prolonged working only at home will decrease productivity and increase the likelihood of mental health issues. So they're the things that we know. And the last bit of that is there is this continual growth of mental health related issues in the community, and it's continuing to go up despite COVID going down. So Karen, Soph, can you put something up for us?
Now, thanks.
Look at that. That's the things you do and I just can't do.
That's all right.
My stick figures never work as well as your stuff.
That's right. Look, so here's a slide, and I'm not sure whether this has gone out to you this morning, but if not, it'll come with the follow-up email after today's session. But I thought I'd put together just a couple of points in the workplace, in the work context, in terms of what employees' mental health, what are where are we at a year after we've had that lockdown? And what, like you said earlier, we know that certainly it's clear that people can definitely do their jobs quite effectively away from the physical workplace. But what we're seeing is that prolonged period of being away from colleagues, managers, does have an adverse impact on people's mental health and well-being. So, I mean, there's ample evidence out there in terms of the mental distress. The employment insecurity piece is still huge across many different sectors, some more vulnerable than others. Young people being impacted like extra vulnerable, for them. And the psychological hazard, there was an interesting national survey that found that most employers weren't doing enough to be able to provide that environment where people could feel safe at work as a result of COVID as well. Chronic loneliness or isolation is another way of putting it, is a real issue as well. So, and with workers' compensation on the rise, we're seeing that now that started to trickle in. Yeah. We weren't sure what was happening there, but now we're actually seeing that on the rise.
There's also one really interesting data point that showed that when people were forced to work from home, a lot of people who were resilient, strong people boomed, but the people who were vulnerable deteriorated dramatically. Yeah,
look, that's an interesting statement. But when people boomed, I mean, I wonder at what point will they continue to boom? Because
the evidence is once that it's a bit like we've got a flood coming and everybody joins together and runs away and does all the right things. They work hard together, but once the crisis is over,
I'm just saying that the adrenaline, like it gets to a point where, it's you're flat out, you know what I mean? And it goes to the last point on work-life balance in terms of that's really been really testing and challenging for most of us, irrespective of what your circumstances are. It's just been really hard. So when you combine all those things together, mental health is a real issue, and it's not something that's going to go away. It's actually going to be, it's going to be something that we need to actively manage and have a framework at work to be able to support our people. And when I say people, just employees, but our own leaders. Yeah, it's top, bottom, left, front, across. So but anyway, I thought that was just some insights for you.
I know, Karen. I think the issue that I just wanted to sort of raise with you is this: there is still increasing uncertainty. You know, it's still increasing. I'm using really bad grammar today. There is, and that's a person who hasn't drunk for 8 days. Mm-hmm. What we do know is that people remain uncertain as to what their employers want them to do in work, how they want them to work. Mm. And the other part is the neuropsychology of you being remote is not actually that helpful for engagement. Mm. Remember, engagement creates two things. It creates good health. It creates high productivity. Yeah. So engagement is the core. You know, we've built our business structure and Return to Work about this being an engagement bubble, as it were, and people work in other parts. You know, they work at home. The younger guys are inclined to come here because they love working in here. Yep. The rest of us are inclined to do our deep thinking work away from work. But the idea here and the deliberate actions we take are around making engagement, because we know the neuropsychology is you need to be with someone when you're doing complex ideas to bounce off them to get that capability. You and I came home in a car from dinner last night, and it's the first time we've sat together for weeks because of the nature of the work that we do. And it was great. We actually started having a chat, and we realized there was a whole lot of issues we solved just driving home at 10 o'clock at night and going, actually, if we'd been doing this by Zoom, we would have never got that done.
Yeah. And I've known you for 16 years, Andrew. Do you know?
And we don't still here.
I know. No, look, the point is that 16 years, we know each other really well. We've worked closely, like really closely for a long time. And it's like, and if I don't see you for a week, I could still be fine. I mean, the relationship is fine, but to be in the room with you and have a conversation or coffee with you, I don't know. I don't have words or, you know, a statistic to give you there, but it just makes a difference. And it's, yeah, in a good way. So.
Yeah. And look, simply on the law part of it, let's go to where the law is. And we said we'd do this very quickly this week, which is mental health lives in the space of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. It doesn't live in the negative obligations that sit in discrimination legislation and others. It sits under, in Victoria, Section 22, which is the obligation to monitor health, to provide a safe, and Section 21, providing a safe workplace and safe system of work. That obligation is to do everything reasonably practical to monitor someone's health, which is, we know mental health's a hazard. So this is the first part of reasonably practical. We know it's a high risk. We know we have an obligation to control that risk and to use resources to do that. And that comes down to management, engagement and capability, because that's the sole resource to monitor mental health. It is the people who are managing people who are the front line of knowing if there is an issue to manage. Now, the systems and investment, that's a leadership group issue. Mm. How do I build the capability down? Because you can't eliminate mental health as a control. That's not a control. You can't shoot someone because they've got a mental health issue. That doesn't work that way. Yeah. What you can do is build an atmosphere and a culture that is safe for people and respectful. But that requires more than telling Karen to be respectful. She actually has to learn the skills around how do I speak to someone, the skills of how to identify risk in people, the skills of what happens when I do identify a risk in people, what do I do? It does require policy development so that people understand there's rules around it. Remember, policies don't stop bullets.
Yeah, speaking of policy, and I know we're tracking in terms of a little bit behind time, but I think this is important to make around wellbeing policies. Yeah. And in terms of turning up to work when you're not ready.
Oh, Karen, you're killing me.
Sorry, I know you felt a bit of pain this week as a result of that. But I think it's important.
We've lost our commercial team this week because of someone getting a cold and spreading it. They could have been on the train when they're coming in, but just assume that that came from someone inside here. I just want to ask a couple of really simple questions. Would you go into the office and punch somebody in the head? Would you? No, and you'd be sacked, wouldn't you, if you did it? If you punch someone in the head, it might just deflect, it mightn't cause them a lot of pain, but you'd be sacked for it. If I came in and stole $20,000 or $30,000 from the business, what would happen? I'd be sacked. We wipe out my whole commercial team. They're incredibly sick. They're very, very unwell, more than a smack in the head. We've lost a whole lot of productivity. Isn't it the same thing? Now, I know, because I'm an old-fashioned Protestant who used to turn up to work every single day, and I disdain people who were sick. I promise you, as a younger man, pre-60. But there's just no reason to do it anymore. There's no basis. I know it looks loyal, it looks courageous, you're just hurting people and you're damaging the business. So there needs to be a policy, and COVID has driven this point home. You can work successfully at home. Please don't come to work with any symptoms of it, and then deal with it like a performance issue, because it is
actually a serious misconduct issue, actually.
It is a conduct issue. Enough.
Okay, all right.
Enough. You fired me up, because my pocket is burning. Okay, let's move on to the next subject. So we're going to go to the problem now. And Sophie's loading it up. So this is an interesting problem today. Jenny was a junior accounts clerk who worked for Nevin. She was having trouble getting to work on time, missed many Mondays and Fridays, had exhausted her personal leave, seemed increasingly shy and fragile, and has recently gone on protracted stress leave. Jenny has now been absent for 42 days in the last 12 months. Brad is Nevin's boss and lives near Jenny. When Brad looked over Jenny's fence, he saw her playing and smiling with a toddler. She seemed very happy to him. Brad wrote a letter to Jenny requiring, it should be her, that's my grammar, attend work for a meeting to show cause why her employment should not be terminated for falsely claiming she was not fit for work. Jenny subsequently put in a workers' comp claim for stress. Now, you ready, guys? Poll. Okay, the first numbers are starting to roll in. This is exciting. I like election though. Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
How are we going there with numbers? I'm a bit blind, so.
10 seconds to go, people. Got most people voting already, which is great. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. Let's share the results.
All right, can you just move them sideways so I can see the questions?
Yeah, okay. Cool.
All right, so the first question is, should Nevin have spoken to Jenny about a mental health and created a care plan prior to taking stress leave? So the rule since Burke and Suncorp is a case which says quite clearly, if a reasonable person could have detected a health-related issue, why is Brad the bad guy?
Sorry, Brad.
Sorry, Brad. I didn't think of you when I did it, mate.
Honest.
Yeah, honest. So Burke and Suncorp says if a reasonable person could observe there is a health-related issue with the person, the obligation is to intervene. Okay. Grant and DPP says that intervention has to identify what is the problem the person has, look at the nature of the role the person undertakes, in respect to the work they can do, ensure that they're supervised and supported in respect to the work that they're unable to do, reasonable adjustments have to be made. And that's what the law says, okay? Burke and Suncorp turned the law on its head in 2015, because prior to that time, if Karen turned up with a leg amputated and she didn't tell me she'd done it, I could still require her to walk. It's crazy. Someone had to tell you they had a problem before you were obliged to take it into consideration. And not surprisingly, the court in Burke and Suncorp said you go to the safety legislation first. Reasonable person monitor health. Yep. Okay, so the answer to the first one is definitely yes. I've snuck the next one in as a fun question, and it's a lawyer's question, so it's naughty. Is Brad peek over the fence a breach of surveillance law in New South Wales? Well, it wouldn't be in Victoria, is the short answer, because you don't require the consent of someone to do it, to peek in Victoria. It might be a trespass if you got your nose over. So if I looked over the fence, it'd definitely be a trespass because my nose would go way over the fence. I may trip somebody over. But in New South Wales, it's a form of covert surveillance for which people must give their authority. So it's actually an offence in New South Wales and Queensland and a number of other states and territories. I just want to warn you, surveillance of this type, and there's a case called Kerrigan, shows how incredibly stupid it is, because how could a person by looking determine what a state of someone's mental or physical health is? Kerrigan, the guy was working on a car and he's meant to have a back injury and his love was cars. Now, it didn't mean that when he was working on his back injury, he put in a workers' comp claim, that he was actually doing work which would hurt his back, one. Two, who says he wasn't in pain? So be aware, this physical surveillance, I think I've said to all of you before, you know, a person's off on stress leave and they say they're depressed and you see them down the street having coffee and smiling with a friend.
Or buying a bag of groceries.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they're not depressed. It means they're having a cup of coffee with a friend and maybe they're sharing those sentiments with them. Now, I think I've got something from Matt. I missed what Matt said, so I'll let Karen find that out. Okay, so just remember, surveillance is a dumb thing to do. I always think the beatings will continue until morale improves. Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, could Brad's actions, including his letter, entitle Jenny to bring a general protections claim? And the answer is, and I think you guys are
saying yes.
Yeah. I think he formed. And one of the things about adverse action is you don't have to know a person has a protected attribute. You can perceive they have a protected attribute. In this case, Brad, you know, he may have known or not known, and when he came back and said, oh, she's on sick leave, the moment he takes an action in respect of a state of knowledge, that subjective knowledge, that enlivens the general protections, okay? And he has formed a view and then sought to act upon it in a misconceived way. I think he's in real trouble. I think he's in a bigger problem around discrimination, but he's in a genuine problem with general protections, okay? Let's play out what would happen. Did he act unfairly as a result of his observations? The answer is yes, okay? Factually, yes. So I think he's in trouble. The last question is, would Jenny's workers' compensation claim be accepted? So let's talk about the elements that have to be proved. Was work a substantial contributor to what occurred? Well, yes, okay? Not so much that she became depressed when she was at work, but Brad's actions, okay? The second thing is, does she suffer a psychological injury? We don't know the answer to that, but let's accept that she does. The third thing is, in respect of her behaviour, was there reasonable management action? And the one thing that's absolutely clear in this case is it couldn't be reasonable management action. Reasonable management action has two limbs. Was the intervention fair, and was it done fairly? So first, was it fair on the evidence that Brad had? Clearly not. Was it done fairly? A letter out of the blue requiring you to show cause? Clearly not proper procedural fairness and respect, because no evidence was put before her and they had no evidence in which to start that process. So the process was flawed. Where workers' comp always fails is process, okay? You can often get around bigger mistakes, but if you breach a process, you're dead in workers' comp land, okay? So there are problems for today, and the results are really heartening. You guys pretty much pick it right every single time that we do this, which means either we're not setting hard enough problems or you're getting better. I don't know what the answer is.
That's good. Always a good exercise to do. So I know lots of people enjoy the case study. So
all right, well, we're going to see you next week, and we're going to dig in much deeper into mental health next week, and I'll talk much more around the law of it. I've talked briefly about what the law is, but we'll sort of set something up between Karen and I that gives you a structure of consideration, I think, for next week. I've got this issue, how do I go through it in a segmented way so that you can actually train staff and show them what they should be doing. But thanks very much, guys. Lovely to catch up too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we do have thank goodness we have this once a week, hey?
That's good. Yeah, well, we missed it for Easter.
Yeah.
And that's we're too busy being bunnies. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Have a great
See you later.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.